Today we're going to be learning about constructing angles. First, let's take a look at the instruments that we need for doing constructions. The first thing you're going to need is your compass. You need to make sure that the compass's hinge is nice and tight. If it isn't tight enough, you might end up with your compass slipping while you're doing constructions, and we don't want that. So if it's not tight enough, you can use a screwdriver to tighten it. Also make sure that your pencil is nice and sharp. Then you're also going to need a protractor, which we use for measuring angles. Then a ruler for drawing straight lines and for measuring distances. Another pencil. I recommend having a second pencil so you don't have to keep on taking your pencil in and out of the compass. And then an eraser in case you need to make any corrections. Okay, so now let's go and have a look at our first construction that we're going to be doing for today. In this construction over here, we are going to be bisecting an angle. So first of all, I've got an angle over here. This is the point P. To bisect this angle, we're going to use our compass. You're going to open it up. I recommend not having it the radius too tiny. It makes it more difficult to work with. So open it up to a decent size that is a little bit easier to work with. And then you put your needle on the point P. And then you're going to go and draw an arc through each arm of the angle. So I'm going to draw an arc through there and another arc through there. And we're going to call the points where these arcs intersect the arms over here. I'll call that point A. And this point B over here. Okay, once you've done that, you take your compass again, and you're going to go, and you can keep the radius the same if you want, or you can change it. Doesn't really matter, but you need to keep it the same for both of the arcs we're going to be drawing now. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to put the needle on point B over here. I'm going to go and draw an arc in the middle of my angle over there. Then to go and put the needle on point A and do the exact same thing, draw another arc in the middle so that it intersects with the arc that I just drew. Okay, so once I've done that, I'm now going to take my ruler. I'm going to go and join up the point P with the point where these two arcs intersected over there. So now I have bisected this angle over here. Bisecting means cutting exactly in half. So this angle over here is going to be the same as that angle over there. They are both half of the angle that I started with. Okay, so that's how you bisect an angle. The next thing we're going to do is constructing a perpendicular line at a given point. Okay, so to construct a perpendicular line at a given point, we start off with our line, with the point that we're going to be drawing our perpendicular line at. We're going to call this point P over here. Then you're going to need your compass. Open it up like this so that it's a decent radius, and put your needle on the point P. And then you're going to go and draw an arc through each side, through the line on each side of the point P, like that. Okay, once you've done that, we're going to call this over here point A. That's where the one arc intersects over there, and where the other arc intersects, we're going to call that point B. Okay. Now the next thing you're going to do is you're going to take your compass again, you're going to make it a bit wider. It needs to be wider than it was when you did these two arcs over here. You're going to go and put your needle on point A, and you're going to draw an arc above the point P, like that. Then you're going to, without changing the radius of your compass, you're going to put on point B over here, and you're going to go and draw another arc so it intersects with the one that you drew over there. And then we're going to go and join up the point where these two arcs intersect and the point P. So over here, I'm going to join these up to form a line which is now perpendicular to the line that we started with. So this over here will now be a right angle, like that. Okay, so that's how you draw a perpendicular line at a given point. Now in this video, I'm not going to be going through how to construct a perpendicular bisector of a line segment, or how to construct a perpendicular line from a given point. If you need to see how to do those constructions, you can find step-by-step instructions for doing those in another video that I have in my channel. But for now, we're going to be going on to constructing a 45-degree angle. To construct a 45-degree angle, we're going to first construct a 90-degree angle in the same way that we just did over here. And then you're going to go and bisect that 90-degree angle, because remember, when we bisect an angle, we cut it exactly in half, and 45 degrees is half of 90 degrees. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this angle that I've just constructed over here, and I'm going to go and bisect this angle. So I make my compass whatever radius I want it to be. Just make sure that it is something that you're not going to get confused with what you've already got over here. So make sure it's not exactly the same as anything you've got over here. So you can make it bigger or smaller, so long as it's not going to be confusing for you. Put the needle on the point P again, and then you're going to go and draw an arc. So it goes through each of the arms of the angle. So an arc through there and an arc through here, like we did when we bisected the angle earlier. We can call it C and D if we want to, just so we have something to call it. Then we're going to go and put my needle on the point D over here and draw an arc so it goes in the middle of my angle. And then we're going to do the same thing from the point C over here. And draw an arc so that it goes through the one that I just drew over there. So it intersects with the arc I just drew. And then I can go and join this point over here where they intersected with the point P. So now this angle over here should be 45 degrees, and this angle should also be 45 degrees, like that. Okay, so that's how you construct a 45-degree angle. The next thing we're going to go on to doing is constructing a 60-degree angle. Okay, so here I'm starting with line segment AB, and I'm going to draw a 60-degree angle at the point A. So I'm going to start with my compass, and to open it up fairly wide, I'm going to put my needle on point A. Then I'm going to go and draw a big arc that's going to go from somewhere above A all the way around so that it intersects with AB, like that. Then without changing the radius of my compass, I'm going to put the needle on the point where the arc intersected with AB. I'm going to go and draw another arc so it intersects with that arc again over there. Once I've got this point where these two arcs intersect, I'm going to go and join it up with point A, like this. And now this over here is a 60-degree angle. Okay, so that's how you construct a 60-degree angle. The next thing we're going to do is constructing a 30-degree angle. Now remember, 30 degrees is half of 60. So what we're going to do is, just like for constructing a 45-degree angle, we bisected a 90-degree angle, we're going to do the same thing over here. We're going to take our 60-degree angle, we're going to bisect it, we're going to cut it in half to get our 30-degree angle. So using the same process that we did for bisecting an angle, we're going to take our compass, I'll make it a little bit smaller just so I can see the difference between what I just did over here and what I'm doing now. To put my needle on A, again I'm going to go and draw an arc through each arm without changing the radius, like that. I'll call these C and D. And then I'm going to go and put my needle on point D, and I will draw an arc in the middle of my angle like that. And then I'll put the needle on point C and do the same thing so it intersects with the arc I just drew. And now I've got a point over here that I can join up with A that will then cut this angle in half to form a 30-degree angle, like that. So then this over here should be 30 degrees. So to draw a 30-degree angle, we construct a 60-degree angle, and then we cut that in half, we bisect it. Okay, so that's how we do constructions for 90-degree angles, 45-degree angles, 60-degree angles, and 30-degree angles. Okay, now we're going to go on to constructing multiples of 30-degree angles, 60-degree angles, and 45-degree angles. In order to construct multiples of these angles, it's important for you to know how to construct the angles on their own. So that's why we went through all of those, which you should already have known how to do. But now when you're constructing multiples of these angles, there are two approaches you can follow. The first approach is to think of the angle that you're constructing as a combination of different angles, or as the difference between two different angles. Okay, so I'm going to show you both methods in the example we're going to be doing over here. So this example, we're going to be constructing a 150-degree angle. Okay, so to construct this, I can either look at it as a combination of angles. So that's the first approach. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with a line over here, and I'm going to construct my angle at point P on the line over here. So if I'm constructing the angle 150 degrees, first of all, I can think of that as a combination of angles. So I can think of 150 degrees as 90 degrees plus 60 degrees. Okay, so 150 is the same as 90 plus 60. So what I can do is I can construct a 90-degree angle by following the same process that we learned about earlier. So I'm going to take my protractor, put it on point P, just go and draw an arc through there and an arc through here. Then I'm going to go and make it wider, draw another arc from this point over here above, and from this point over here going through that arc, and then to go and join these up. So now I've got a 90-degree angle over here. Then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to construct a 60-degree angle to add onto this to make 150 altogether. So I'm going to take my compass and put the needle on point P. I'm going to draw an arc so it goes through like this over here, a big arc because I'm drawing a 60-degree angle. Then I'm going to go and put the needle on the place where that arc intersected with this line over here. I'm going to go and draw another arc that intersects with that. And then I can go and join up my point P with that point over there with the two arcs intersected. So over here, this is 90 degrees, which I constructed first. And then this angle over here is 60 degrees. So altogether, this whole angle over here is 150 degrees. So now I can go and check that. So if I go and put my protractor on here, I can check that this angle over here is 150 degrees. Okay, so that's how you can draw an angle by thinking of it as a combination of angles. So over here, I first constructed a 90-degree angle, and then I constructed a 60-degree angle from that 90-degree angle over there. Okay, I added onto it. The other approach is to think of it as the difference between two angles. So over here, I can think of 150 as 180 degrees, which is a straight line, minus 30 degrees. Okay, so to do this over here, what I can do is I can once again take my line that I'm starting with, and I'm going to start with point P. That's where I'm going to have my angle, and I'm going to work with this as 180 degrees because a straight line is always 180 degrees. And then I'm going to go and construct a 30-degree angle. Now remember, to construct a 30-degree angle, we construct a 60-degree angle and then we bisect it. Okay, so I'm going to take over here, I'm going to construct the 30-degree angle on this side, so it's going to end up with 150 going this way, the same as it did for that one. So I'm going to have over here my 60-degree angle first. So I'm going to put the needle on point P. I'm going to go and draw an arc that goes through that line and then quite high up. I'm going to go and put the needle on this point where the arc intersected and draw another arc through there to intersect there. So this over here, if I join this up, that's a 60-degree angle over there. But I wanted a 30-degree angle because 150 is the same as 180 minus 30. So now I'm going to go and cut this in half. So I'm going to take this over here, put that needle over there on P again, draw an arc there, draw an arc there, put it on each of these over here, draw an arc there, and put it over there and draw an arc there to intersect. And then I can go and cut this in half by drawing a line through point P and the point where those two arcs intersected. So then this angle over here is half of 60, which is 30 degrees. That means that I'm left with a total angle of 150 degrees, because 180 minus 30 is 150, like that. Okay, so this over here, if you check it, should be 150 degrees, like that. You can see over there, I've got 150 degrees. Okay, so that's two approaches for drawing a 150 degree angle. You can do it as a combination by working out, or by drawing a 90 degree angle and then drawing a 60 degree angle and adding them together. Or you can do it as a difference between two angles. In this case, I was working with 180 degrees and then removing 30 degrees. Okay, so those are the two approaches. Now I'm going to give you a couple that you're going to do for yourself to practice this. The first one you're going to do is you have to construct a 135 degree angle. So you can choose which approach you want to use, whichever one you think is going to be the most effective for what you're doing over here, and you're going to construct a 135 degree angle. I'm going to give you 3 minutes to work on this construction. Okay, so let's go through that construction quickly. Okay, so like I said, you had a choice. You could either think of this as a combination of angles or as the difference between two angles. But in this case, it actually doesn't really make any difference in terms of the way you're going to actually do the construction. So first of all, 135 degrees is the same as 90 degrees plus 45 degrees. So you could have constructed it as 90 degrees and then added on 45 degrees, or you could have thought of it as 135 degrees is the same as 180 degrees minus 45 degrees. But like I said, no matter which way you think of it, it actually comes to the same thing, because you either way to draw a 45 degree angle, for both of them, you're going to have to construct a 90-degree angle, which you're then going to bisect. So it actually doesn't make any difference for this one which way you thought of it, because it's going to work out as the same thing you have to do anyway. So we start off with our line, and the point where we're going to be drawing our angle, I'll call that point P. Okay, and then I'm going to go and construct a 90-degree angle, because in order to do a 45-degree angle, I have to construct a 90-degree angle anyway. Okay, so I'm going to take my compass over here, put it on the point P, and to go and draw an arc on either side of point P going through that line. Okay, then I'm going to make my compass wider and put it on each of these points over here and draw an arc above point P like that, over there and over there, and then we're going to go and join this up. Okay, so now I've got a 90-degree angle over there. So now I've got over here my 90-degree angle, and I've got a 180-degree angle. So whichever approach you did, you would have had to do this, because now you're going to go and bisect that 90-degree angle to get a 45-degree angle. So I'm going to go and take this over here. I'm going to draw an arc through each of the arms of this 90-degree angle over here, on this side over here and over there. I'm doing it here because I want my 45-degree angle to be on this side, because I want my 135-degree angle to go this way. If you were wanting your 135-degree angle to go that way, then you would do it on this side over here. Okay, once I've done that, I put my needle on this point where the arc intersected this arm over here, and draw an arc halfway between there, and do the same thing from this point over here, so it intersects with that. And then I can go and join this point over here, that where the two arcs intersected, with point P over there. So now I've got a 90-degree angle plus a 45-degree angle, giving me 135. Or I've got a 180-degree angle minus a 45-degree angle, also giving me 135 degrees. Okay, so if you check it over here, you should find that this angle is 135 degrees like that. So that's how you construct a 135-degree angle. Okay, now we're going to go on to the last one for today, which is constructing a 240-degree angle. Okay, so now for this one, think about what would be the best approach to use for constructing this 240-degree angle. I'm going to give you 2 minutes for this construction. Okay, so let's go through what you should have got for that construction. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is identify what is the best approach to use for doing this construction. For a 240-degree angle, there's only really one approach that makes sense, and that is to think of it as a combination of angles. So 240 degrees is the same as 180 degrees plus 60 degrees. So I'm going to have 180 degrees, which is a straight line, and I'm going to have a 60-degree angle that I'm going to add to that. So I'm going to first draw my straight line over here. And I'm going to be drawing my angle at this point over here, which I'm going to call the point P. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is, first of all, this over here is 180. So I need to add on to that. So I'm going to carry on drawing from there. So I'm going to be drawing in this direction over here, a 60-degree angle. So I'm going to take my compass, put the needle on point P, and then I'm going to go and draw my arc to go through this line over here, and I'm going to keep on going quite far, because remember, when we're drawing a 60-degree angle, we need to have a big arc to start with. Then I'm going to go and take my compass and put it on the point where this arc intersected, and then I'm going to go and draw a new arc to intersect with that arc over there. Okay, so this over here, this point, I can now go and join up with point P. Like that, and this will give me a 60-degree angle over here, which means that if I've got 180 and 60, then altogether this whole angle over here will be 240 degrees. So that's what you should have got for that construction. Okay, and that is how we construct angles. Now that we've learned the concepts in this lesson, it's important to practice, practice, practice. If you haven't already got the worksheet that goes with this video, you can find it by clicking on the link in the description below. The worksheet comes with an extra exercise full of questions for you to work on to master the concepts covered in this lesson. If you found this video helpful, please hit the like button so that others can benefit from it too. Also, be sure to subscribe so that you can easily find my other lessons, and hit the bell so that you will get notified about lessons as I upload them.